I've been shown an incredibly powerful training session that is actually both more effective and easier. And yes, this is legit. There are a million different ways of getting fit, and each one seemingly promises that it will unlock new levels of performance. But the older I get, the more I realise that whilst there is good training and bad training, there are no shortcuts. Sad face. Except, perhaps, this one. Is it, though, quite as magic as it seems? In this video, I will explain it all, speak to the scientists who created it, and demonstrate what it's like in comparison to others. Now, before we go any further, let's make sure we're on the same page here. What I'm going to be telling you about is an interval session. Interval training being a great way of getting more out of your riding time if you've got a specific goal or objective. And to be fair, that goal might well just be improving your general health and fitness. It's all about alternating periods or intervals of hard riding followed by easier recovery intervals in between. Now, there is an almost infinite number of variations of interval sessions that you can do, varying both intensity and duration. Typically, the harder the interval, the shorter it will need to be, and the less recovery you have between it, the harder the session will feel. Now, essentially, you choose what you want to do based on the outcomes that you want. Now, one of the reasons why interval sessions are so effective, other than making you ride harder than you otherwise would do if you just went out for a bike ride, is that they allow you to do more work than if you just did one long continuous effort. Now, when it comes to high-intensity training, there is a direct correlation between the amount of time you spend above 90% of your VO2 max and the training response you get. The more time above 90%, the fitter you become. This is pretty well established, and I checked with Professor Bent Ronestad, who is a world-leading sports scientist, and he showed me a whole raft of research to back this up. And we will speak to him later. The tough bit here is that 90% of VO2 max is really flipping hard. But this is where our magic training session comes in. So what is it? Well, you have been waiting patiently. Here is what you need to know. There is a trick, a shortcut, if you will, that allows you to spend the maximum amount of time possible at over 90% of VO2 max. The answer is 30-15s, the magic bullet, the golden goose, micro intervals. Even sounds easy, doesn't it? Now, I know what some of you are going to be saying. What the flip is a 30-15? And it is a great question. We'll come on to it in just a moment. Others of you, though, are no doubt saying, this isn't new. And yes, you are right. 30-15s have been around for a little while. But the reason it's on my radar now is because of the training I was doing recently for the 7 gravel race.
Where did you come in the 7 gravel race, right?
Where did I come in the 7 gravel? Well, it's kind of you to ask. I flipping won, baby! My training plan from coach Simon Jones included a few days with a very complicated looking interval session. 3 by 13 by 30-15. I had to get him to explain. 3 times, or 4 on some days, 13 reps of 30 seconds really hard with 15 seconds easy in between. I've got to say, even after Simon explained it, I still thought it was a bit weird. Who does 13 reps of anything? We'll get onto that in a moment, but anyway, I tried the session, and honestly, it blew me away, which I don't think I can say about any other training session. I've been around for a long time, I've done a lot of training, but it's not often I try something and go, ooh, that was good. So I'm going to try and actually show you why it's good. I'm going to take you along on an interval. So wish me luck. 500 watts on for me, and then about 200 watts off. So we'll see how it goes.
Is it recording one way or 360?
I don't know, mate.
I think that's 360.
It looks like three. Woo, yeah, boy! Let's go! Whap, whap, whap! 3, 2, 1, go.
First one kind of always feels hard because your legs are a little bit stiff. But getting towards the end of the first 30, a 3, 2, 1, recovery. Okay. 15 seconds goes real quick. It's got to be said. Okay. And well, we're off. And go. Okay. Part of it, you know, is that you're never going so hard for so long. You can't just get to the end of it. Okay, 2, 1. Damn, recovery on a steep bit. Last one. Oh. I mean, when I say easy, it's not easy, but essentially that was a lot of work. And because the intervals are always so short, after you've accelerated into the 30, you've only got to hold it for 15 seconds. Now, to kind of prove a point of how much time you can spend above VO2 max, I'm going to now try and do a conventional 5-minute one at a steady state, just to illustrate. And then I might go for a piece of flapjack. Right then, steady state, 5 minutes. Not entirely sure I'm going to be able to hold actually, but we'll aim for 4:30-ish. See how we go. 30 seconds in, ready for a rest. I think mentally, that's why it's harder, because I know I've just got to keep the gas on now. Good for improving longevity, this interval session. Nothing makes your life seem longer than a 5-minute interval. I'm to use a lot of tricks in my toolbox. 45 seconds. Pretty much same average power, but half the duration, almost. And mentally, I think that feels harder, a lot harder, and yet, technically it should have been easier, right? Now, the bad news is that no matter which session I was going to do, still only halfway through. I'll see you guys later.
While I've got my head down, let's look at some stats. In the 30-15s, I averaged 418 watts for 9 minutes 30, did 6 minutes 30 at 450 watts plus, and while it took slightly longer to get to 90% of VO2 max, I was there for over 7 minutes. In the 5-minute effort, I averaged 436, hit 90% quicker, but only 4 minutes was over 90% of VO2 max. So over the course of the workouts, either 4x5 or 3x13 by 30-15s, that would add up to 16 minutes versus 22 minutes 30 at over 90%, a significant difference. But what effect would that have on your fitness? Well, helpfully, studies have directly compared the two types of intervals over a period of 10 weeks, and the results are really striking. According to Ronestad et al., in good amateur cyclists, power output in a 40-minute time trial increased by 12% in the 30-15 group compared to just 4% in the longer interval group. In a 5-minute test, the 30-15s improved by 8%, the longer interval group didn't improve at all. And then a very similar study, but among elite cyclists, also showed that after just 3 weeks, the 30-15 group improved their power at threshold by 3%, whereas the long interval group saw a 3.5% decrease. And in a 20-minute max test, the 30-15 group not only improved, but were also able to tolerate higher levels of lactate.
Some pretty impressive results there then, and as I said, from a session that I think is more enjoyable to do and easier to complete. But I said earlier, there are a gazillion different interval training sessions you can do. Why is it that this one is seemingly more effective? Why is it better than a 40-20 or a 30-30? Well, who better to hear from than the man who invented the session in the first place, Professor Bent Ronestad. He's the guy that's done the landmark research on strength training for cyclists, on heat training for cyclists, and has literally written a book on interval training for cyclists, which is incidentally called Interval Training for Cyclists. I asked him where the idea for the session came from, why it's better, and also how you should implement it into your riding. And to be honest with you, I enjoyed chatting to him so much, we're actually going to leave the call pretty much uncut for you guys to watch as well. For those of you who, like me, hearing from super smart people talk about subjects that you find interesting too.
So where did the inspiration for these 13 by 30-15 sessions come from?
Yeah, so actually now it has accumulated a quite nice story. So it was quite a long time ago since we first started looking into optimizing interval sessions. I think it was around 2010-11 actually, and then we when looking into the literature at that time point, there was not so much on it. And when we're talking about short intervals, there was this. Yeah, one of the first studies in the late 90s by Steptoe and colleagues, which investigated a lot of different intervals. But then typically in this period, and maybe for the next 10 years, the short intervals was typically 30-second maximal effort, and then like a 3 or 4 minutes recovery in between. And I felt that was not like a quite fair comparison with the more traditional 5 to 6 minutes longer intervals. So I was inspired by the 30 seconds that they did a lot of studies on, but I wanted shorter recoveries. And then I actually looked in a study from around 1960 by the famous exercise physiologist Bengt Saltin, who were running on a treadmill up. And when I look at it, it was probably around the maximal aerobic speed. And then he tested out number of different short interval options. So 5 seconds on, 5 seconds off, 10 seconds on, 5 seconds off, etc. But it was only one combination there that had the 2-to-1 ratio between work and recovery. And that was by far the best option in terms of time with high VO2. And also distance covered, because it was standardized to a 20-minute effort altogether. So that indicated that this would give a really good stimuli. And at the same time, in the 90s, if we jump back there, then Veronique Bilat had many studies focusing on time at VO2 max, or time about 90% of VO2 max. And I was also fascinated by that work. So then, to shorten this story, then I wanted to compare in cyclists this 30-15, so the 2-to-1 ratio. That was the reason why we ended up with that. And then we compared this with around 3-minute efforts and 5-minute efforts. And then the recovery was always half of the work duration. And then at this time also it was suggested that the maximal aerobic speed was a good speed for giving a long time at high VO2. So the first project, we used the same power, the maximal aerobic power, in all 3 different intervals. And then they simply continued until failure. And then, of course, the 30-15s have almost twice the time before fatigued, before failure. And also, that also led to a significantly longer time, above 90% of VO2 max. So that was the first small acute study. And then, of course, you could say, and I totally agree with that, it's not fair to have the same power output if you are doing 30 seconds, 3 minutes, or 5 minutes. So then we went on to check this further. And then our first intervention study, we compared the 30-15s with 5-minute interval in well-trained cyclists, mean VO2 max of 65, 2 sessions per week for 10 weeks. So one group did 4 by 5-minute interval. And then the aim was to have as high power output as possible, high average power output as possible. And then, so this is the reason why it's 13 30-15s, because 3 times 13 30-second efforts with 15-second recovery. So altogether, this makes 19.5 minutes. And that was the closest I was able to get to 20 minutes. So that's how it ended, to these strange numbers. To try to normalize on time, and then the effort in the intervals should be maximal, just to normalize for effort. And then, of course, the consequence of this is that the power in the 30-second work intervals was higher compared to the 5-minute. And in that I guess was the first intervention studies that we showed better training responses to the 30-15s compared to 5-minute intervals.
And what were the improved results? Because it felt like, from reading it, it was quite a broad spectrum of improvements, and not just at VO2 max, right?
Yeah, exactly. And we thought it was a little bit fun to include both a maximal 30-second sprint and a 5-minute maximal effort in the test battery, to see if there was some specificity in the training there. And also we had the longest test was a 40-minute maximal power. And we had the power output at 4 millimoles, so it was a quite large test battery. But in all measurement, it was in advantage of the 30-15s. You might expect that for a 40-minute long effort, the 5 minutes would be better, because then you work continuously for longer time. But then also it, in another way, can be rationalized that it's actually as expected, that the 30-15s also improved the 40-minute power. So,
and am I right in thinking that when you looked again, but this time at elite cyclists, that the results were similar, not completely the same, but that they were able to tolerate a higher amount of lactate? Was that right?
Yeah, in the follow-up study, because some of the participants, when I was talking to them, they said they had the impression that they were able to tolerate lactate better. And then we had in this second study, we had a 20-minute performance test, and then we measured lactate at certain time point throughout that test. So then, so we thought we would look a little bit closer into that. And the data indicated at least something in this direction.
So why then do you think that you've seen such impressive results from the micro intervals compared to the longer intervals? What is it about them? Is it simply that you're spending more time at a higher power output in the session, so you're essentially training harder?
Yeah, so in some newer studies, we have also normalized for power. So we have included the power in that theory. We have normalized that to same power, but steady. So, and also in that context, this 30-15 gives a longer time, about 90% of VO2 max. So I think that is probably some of the key here. So lately, I think it was in 24, a PhD student of mine, Ingvild Odden, published a really comprehensive work where we had around 2 to 3 HIIT sessions per week for 9 weeks. And we had 22 persons here. So we recorded the oxygen uptake in more than 500 interval sessions. So we had a big data set, and we actually measured the real oxygen uptake in all interval sessions. And then we saw that the persons with the highest percentage of VO2 max across the entire period had the largest improvement in all these typical endurance variables. And that data is quite robust. So it seems like time above 90% of VO2 max or time with high VO2 max, because then you are measuring the actual stress on the body. And it seems like this can be quite important for adaptation. So I would, if I need to suggest something, I would go in that direction.
And so, do you think then, it's because obviously when you're doing a scientific experiment like this, it's very controlled, isn't it? Whereas if you were to write someone a training plan, it would be unlikely to look like this. So do you think that if you were to use these sessions as part of a comprehensive training plan, you would see the same benefits? Or do you think that, if the day before you were doing threshold efforts and the day after you were doing like a long zone 2 ride or whatever, that would kind of moderate the effects?
So in the 2 intervention studies we did, then it was a mix. It was integrated into some threshold and some low intensity. I guess with the first study, the average training volume was 10 hours per week, and then it was maybe around 15 in the second. So the scenario here is in a mixed setting, but the way we described the sessions in the intervention was that it should be maximal effort. And I would not use that in the real world, and I'm not using that in the real world. So my rule of thumb is that in the 30 seconds, you should have approximately the power you are able to hold for 5 minutes. But then you half it after 30 seconds and then on again. So that would be like my general advice and then you of course have to modify based on different individual characteristics.
And do you think there's still a place for the longer intervals as well? Like, maybe even if not physiologically, but mentally, like holding a power output for 5 minutes? Because the micro intervals, it's a very easy way of doing a lot of hard work, isn't it? So mentally it's great, but from a training perspective, should you still do the longer ones as well?
Yeah, I think so, for sure. So it's not one or another. I think you should include both for sure. That being said, after we got so many indices that the 30-15s was better than what you can call traditional 5 minute steady pacing, then we started to look into the 5 minutes, if we could modify them a little bit to improve the time with high VO2. And then our first approach was with a fast start. So you go so what we ended up with finding the best alternative is like a 2-minute high power, and then reduce it after 2 minutes. So the 3 last minutes of each 5 minutes are then lower. And when we took the average of this 5 minutes and compared it with the same average but steady, then this fast start approach was better.
I'm laughing because that's what I used to do when I was a junior and I didn't have a power meter. I'd be like, right, I need to get my heart rate up, so I'm going to go as fast as I can until I get to 190 beats a minute, and then I'm just going to hold it. So, but actually, that is quite an effective way of doing it.
Yeah. In addition, it can be specific in some race situation, especially if you are thinking mountain bike, XCO with a fast start, to get a good position before you enter the single trail. So, and it's funny. There is one, probably more, but I know about one specific study, early 2000, that compared heart rate based with power based instruction for the training for the intervals. And when you have a heart rate based, you have the fast start because you want to ramp up the heart rate before you slow down. And that study actually showed slightly better training adaptations based on heart rate compared to power. But this is just one example. I know there is also studies not showing the same, but it's just a little bit fun related to what you said. Yeah.
So if we step back a little bit then from looking at individual studies and things, do you think that micro intervals are a kind of like a magic training session that allows you to do more work than you otherwise would be able to? And so is it something that you would recommend people do?
Well, of course, we need to see the big picture. So if you are, for example, specializing in time trials, then for sure I would recommend also to have like long continuous intervals and efforts. I think it's one of the different tools you can have when you're going to make up a training plan. And some people actually, as you kind of hinted to, find this more funny to do with this quick changes in power output, and you are always a new thing coming up, so it's easier for the mind to do it. And of course, one important thing with intervals is that it doesn't matter how efficient they are if you are not doing them. So if you are actually doing some intervals and short intervals, and you find that more fun compared to the traditional, then just go ahead and do it. But it's not like I think it's like something magic and much better than all alternatives. I think it's all about the composition of a well-planned training week and month and year.
Okay. And just going back a step or two to the sort of the specifics. So you were talking earlier about doing double the amount of work to recovery. So a really popular session in cycling has been the 40-20s, hasn't it? So how, it feels like we're talking really kind of like minor differences here, but like, is there a difference between these two kind of micro interval durations? Because that's the same thing, right? Double the amount of work to recovery.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't think there is a big difference. I think they are more or less similar. I don't know if it has been tested or compared, but of course the consequence is you need to reduce the power in the work intervals a little bit, because you have you are increasing the work duration, and then also in theory you could it could take a little bit. I think it's quite similar actually, because of course you can, the VO2 can drop a little bit more when you have 20 seconds or 5 second more recovery. But I think this is just details, because you could also think the opposite way, that you are working 10 seconds longer, and then you can speed it up a little bit faster as well. So I think they are quite similar.
Yeah. Okay. And then would you recommend completing one of these like a workout, should we say, with the 30-15s as you have done them in your research? So I think you had 3 sets, didn't you, of 13 reps. So, but you also said that was in part just to get it as close to 20 minutes as possible. So is it a case of, well, actually, why not do like 15 or 10, but then do 4 sets or something? Do you think this is a fairly good session to do?
I think it's a fairly good session, and also like we have like some numbers backing it, that exactly session. But I don't think it's a big issue if you want to reduce it slightly or increase it slightly.
And did you say you're off to Nove Mesto?
Yeah, so I'm the coach of Martin Vidora. He's more specialized. And then I also have like a position in Pinarello Q36.5. So I'm also kind of involved with Tom Pitcock. Yeah. And then on the most important rider is my son.
Well, yeah, like I say, thanks again, and have a great weekend. My fingers crossed for all your riders, and particularly your son.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Okay, cheers.
All right,
bye.
See ya.
Cycling nerds unite. I enjoyed that one. Hit the thumbs up button if you did too. Massive thanks to Professor Ronestad for his time. Now, I would say, no matter what your cycling objective, whether it's peak performance or general health and fitness, actually doing a little bit of VO2 max work definitely pays dividends. So give this session a try. Be very interested to know how you get on. So get involved in the comment section down below and let me know. Otherwise, we'll see you on the next one. I've got another interval to do.
Welcome back to the RCA podcast, which is also on YouTube. Today I'm joined by the RCA's head coach, Ryan Thomas, and today we're going to extend a conversation we had recently about a simple way or a simple format or framework you can utilize to increase FTP. And it's all about periodizing through the zones or spending, strategic periods of your training working specific zones. Right? And according to, you said something interesting, Ryan, in that chat, which I've kind of clung on to, which I think is really easy for if somebody's out there listening that they can think about. Understanding the way Training Peaks calculates fitness, they look at a 6-week rolling average, 42 days. Why is that? Because, in a lot of the literature, it doesn't implicitly say, but it suggests that you need roughly around 6 weeks for the body to absorb a stressor that you're putting on it. In this case, you might be targeting a specific zone. And that's the stress. It could be upper end aerobic, it could be a VO2, it could be threshold. So today we're going to dial it right back and talk about if someone wanted to start on this journey, where's the best place to start?
Zone 3 or tempo, usually the first place you would go.
So let's talk about it.
Yeah, so I think most people would see Zone 2. Zone 2 is plastered everywhere, and people are usually doing some sort of Zone 2 and then some sort of high intensity. And I think the thing that most people come to the RCA with is either fatigue or they're plateaued. So they're struggling to get an improvement and they're doing bunch rides, they're doing random intensity, and usually it comes with fatigue. So the negative of doing a lot of high intensity is the neuromuscular fatigue, the nervous system fatigue that just goes on and on and on, and you don't give it a rest. The benefit of Zone 3 or tempo is there's not a whole lot of neuromuscular fatigue. It's mainly you're keeping everything under threshold, you're not getting to a point where you're in that hard or severe domain where you're really having to work hard. It's just working on efficiency, endurance, and muscular endurance. So I don't think it's something that people dedicate time to for a 6-week period, or it doesn't have to be 6 weeks, 4 to 8 weeks, whatever it is. But I think it's really beneficial if you just focus on it for 6 weeks. Most people get to the end of that and they're like, I just feel good. I just feel good at riding in Zone 2, 3, threshold. You just feel steady, comfortable at riding at that. It's a very different sensation to doing VO2 and feeling really good at high power, but it's really beneficial for when you actually get into that type of work.
Yeah, okay.
Kind of want to start, we'll have a progression and you'll be able to see this laid out, but 6 weeks.
So when you say you'll be able to see this, we've got a downloadable for people below?
Yes, downloadable PDF, goes through every progression week in for 6 weeks. And you do these once to twice a week. And you can do the same workout. So a lot of the things that we do, we try to keep it interesting, but if you get down to the basics, doing the same workout twice in a week is completely fine. Like you're hitting the same physiology. It actually is probably the best way to do it. So we're starting super simple, tempo, zone 3, 80 to 85% of your threshold, critical power. And we're doing that for 10 minutes, 3 by 10 minutes with 5 minutes recovery in zone 1. So that's a pretty easy workout. And most people will go and do that and be like, oh, that didn't really do anything. Like it felt really easy, didn't really get my heart rate high. I was like, I want to go harder. And that you should feel like that. In tempo stuff, you kind of should feel like you want to go harder. But it's really important for these type of work is to stay controlled, stay in your zone, because we're working on efficiency and muscular endurance. You go harder, what starts happening is you start accumulating lactate, your heart rate starts to rise, you start recruiting fast-twitch muscle fibers. That starts adding the fatigue and it takes away, it's not targeting what you want it to. So you get up around threshold, very glycolytic dependent, you're a lot of glycogen down in tempo, it's kind of mixed fat and carbs. So there's a whole bunch of stuff happening there that we're targeting. So as soon as you get above the target, kind of not doing it. So it's really important to teach control, minimize that fatigue week in, week out, and we do it for 6 weeks.
Yeah, okay. And you know, if people are going to adopt something like this where they do target, you know, an upper end aerobic zone, being tempo in this case, they can still do a bunch ride once a week or something where they just go tear it to shreds.
100%.
But the rest of the riding is done in more of that strategic.
Yes.
Obviously a bit of zone 2, but also the tempo that you talk about.
Yes, and to like high intensity interval training, zone 3 is interval training. It's intensity. It's just lower intensity than what a bunch ride would be, or a VO2 session, or a threshold would be. And there's a reason for that. We want to keep it reasonably easy.
Yeah.
But by the end of the 6 weeks, the progression goes through, and we increase time in zone 3. We increase the percentage slightly up to 90%. We decrease recovery during those intervals, and we get all the way up to the last interval session at the 6 week mark is a 40 to 45 minute effort at 85 to 90% threshold.
Okay.
Or you can do 2 by 20s at 85 to 90%. So up to you, but that's a hard effort. Like you do 45 minutes at 90%, the top end, and by the end of it, you're going to be hurting. But that's the whole point. We start easy and gradually overload, gradually stress the system a little bit more each week, and that starts to give really good benefits.
Okay. So if someone was to do this, first and foremost, what should they experience over the 6 weeks if they're focusing majority of their work on upper end aerobic?
You will decrease your RPE at that level. So we have to keep in mind that the intensity is increasing slightly, the intervals are getting longer. So theoretically, we want to see less drift over that time. So if the first session is more of an introductory session, so it's not super taxing at all. But as the weeks go on, that heart rate at that power level, let's say 85%, we should see that heart rate come down a little bit. So if you're finishing one of those intervals and you're finishing at 160 beats per minute, keep an eye on that. Note where your finishing heart rate is sitting. And then over the weeks, compare, this week I finished my 12-minute effort or my 15-minute effort and it was 155. That's 5 beats less than what I was doing in the first week. So that heart rate drop, the decrease in decoupling, so what's your heart rate doing in the first effort versus the last effort, that should change week in, week out. And you should be theoretically, you should be able to push the higher end of the zones as well in terms of power.
Yeah, that's certainly what I noticed when I used to coach people, as you'd see in these tempo efforts, is that, you know, their heart rate would just be drifting or decoupling, as you said, and it would be quite high.
Yes.
And then after sort of 4 or 5 weeks, it stops drifting as much and it comes down. And they're like, oh, this session's feeling really easy. And it's like, well, look, your cardiovascular system's responding.
Yes.
You're adapting to the training. What's one of the negative things people can experience if they did this type of training? And maybe I'll put some words in your mouth here, because I feel like, you know, people do, you know, their goal is to do the local group ride. They want to get from the A to the B group, or the B to the A group, I should say, not the other way around, or, you know, they're racing or something like that. You will over time tend to lose a bit of that upper end stuff by doing this, won't you? So don't expect to get really good sprint power or anaerobic power from this type of training.
As a coach and prescribing this stuff, I wouldn't do it this wouldn't be your only intensity in a 6 week period. You wouldn't usually only do this type of work. So if you're going to if you're going to implement this, maybe you choose this once a week, or you're doing 3 interval sessions, you do this twice a week, and then you do a bunch ride, or you do some sprints, or you do some sort of high intensity stuff to maintain that, because we don't want to lose that. Like, you're going through training, you don't need to be doing only one thing. It's like, you're not going to go out and do 6 weeks of zone 2 only, because you're going to lose a lot of your top end.
Get bored.
Yeah, and you get bored. So there's other important factors, but focusing on that natural progression each week, using 1 to 2 workouts a week where you can do it, and then do your other stuff around it.
Like, even if you did say you wanted to over-index on it, because I've certainly done this before, I've gone, you know what, I'm just spending the next 4 to 6 weeks mainly zone 2 and tempo, and I might do 1 bunch ride, and I don't care if my bunch ride is not that great, as long as I can get through it. Mm-hmm. Once I then get to the next round of training, I'm fresh.
Yes.
So when I do get into the intense stuff, I'm like, I'm ready to go. Plus, I've got a really robust aerobic base because I've kind of maybe over-indexed on it. Been willing to push aside the high-intensity stuff for a period, but it pays dividends longer term. That's certainly been the case for me.
I think it's a really good point, and I think it's so much more applicable to the everyday amateur athlete than it is a professional athlete.
Which is pretty much our audience.
Exactly.
I don't think there's any pros listening, right?
And a lot of people will see what the pros are doing and say, "Oh, I just need to do that." But no. Like, far from the truth. It's because they have so much time to recover. You have no time to recover as a full-time dad, worker. You literally can't spend, like, your recovery time is the hour before you go to sleep.
Yep.
So it's like there's no recovery time there. So if you're constantly trying to replicate what the pros are doing, it's not going to work. Yep. You need that period of training where you're not stressing your body too much, so that when it comes time to do 4 weeks of VO2 work, you're ready and you can really crush that for 4 weeks, and then you back it off, go again.
If you wanted to go buy the book, not that there's a book about this, but if you wanted to, like, take it to the next level, and maybe this is the next video and podcast we do, what happens after this 6 weeks? What are we transitioning to? More sweet spot, threshold, sub-threshold work? Would that be the next one?
Yeah, you would mix in a bit of threshold and VO2. So you kind of want to take it up. So usually 12 to 16 weeks is kind of the period of training for any. This is what we've found out at the RCA, is that any amateur athlete who has other stuff going on, if you're training for more than 12 to 16 weeks in a block, usually you're going to start to fatigue. And if you don't rest before that 16 weeks and you keep going and going and going, you're going to drop or you're going to plateau, and it's going to be really hard. So don't want to think about training too much in the long term, because there's so much context for everyone listening. So we focus on that 6 weeks, and then the 6 to 8 weeks after that, that's where you want to really knuckle down. And that's where you're going to get your peak fitness out of. And we don't want to sustain that for much longer. And the way you peak your fitness is VO2, threshold, sprints, anaerobic work. Depends what your goal is.
Yeah, okay. Cool. All right, well, we'll leave it at that. Ryan's put together, as we mentioned earlier, a PDF which goes through some workout progression in tempo that you can do. We'll put a link to it below, and we'll catch everyone in the next show.
How to get whatever you want. That's the title of the next set of notes. How to get whatever you want. Here's what it says if you're ready. It says, ask. That's it. End of notes. Ask. If there's one art in life to learn extremely well, that's got to be one of them. The art of asking. What does ask mean? Ask means, what do you want? And the formula is staggering. It says ask and what? A guy ought to look into that. See, you've got to be better than a good worker. You've got to be a good asker. Now, let me give you 3 key points on asking and receiving. Number 1, asking is the beginning of receiving. Asking starts a unique process, mental and emotional. I don't even know how it works. All I know is it works. It's like pushing a button and all this machinery starts working. I don't know how, it just works. There's a lot of things you don't need to know how, just work them. Some people are always studying the roots, others are picking the fruit. I mean, it depends on what end of it you want in on. Asking is the beginning of receiving, so start the process. Here's number 2. Receiving is not the problem. Receiving is automatic. Now, if that's true, receiving is not the problem, what's the problem? Failure to ask might be one of your major problems. I don't know. Check it out. The guy says, oh, now I see it. I got up last year and hit it every day, but there's not a scrap of paper with my goals on it. Good worker, poor asker. So you got to change that. Here's number 3. Receiving is like the ocean. There's plenty. Success is not in short supply. It isn't rationed, and you stepped up to the window and it was all gone. No, no, no. It's like an ocean here. Now, if that's true, what's the problem? Well, some people go to the ocean with a teaspoon. Have you got the picture? See, what you want to do in view of the size of the ocean is trade your teaspoon for at least a bucket. Now, there's 2 ways to ask. Here's number 1. Ask with intelligence. Don't mumble. You don't get anything by mumbling. Be clear. Be specific. Intelligent asking means how wide, how high, how soon, when, what size, what color, how much. Define what you want and describe what you want. That's powerful. Goals become like a magnet. They pull you that direction. And the better you describe them, the more they pull. So ask intelligently. Here's number 2. Ask with faith. That's the childish part of the equation. Believe you can get what you want like a child, not an adult. Adults are too skeptical. So the formula really reads, make plans like an adult and believe in them like a child. And the most incredible things will happen. Just try it for 90 days. Now here's the last qualifying phrase on goal setting, as we promised to qualify everything. And it simply goes like this. Remember, you won't get everything you want. And we've already studied the reason for that. Simply, sometimes it hails on your crop and rains on your parade. It's that kind of planet. So you won't get everything you want, but if you will work this goal-setting formula, you can get plenty for wealth and happiness. If there's one thing to get excited over, that's it. Get excited over your ability to make yourself do the necessary things. What could you make yourself do starting tomorrow that would change it all? No telling. Now, see, that's exciting. On any given day, you can massively change the direction of your life. Now, here's the best word I know of to go with action. Massive. See, that'll change everything. Massive action is called the cure-all. If you're going to make calls, make a few thousand. If you're going to make contacts, make a few thousand. If you're going to knock on doors, knock on a few thousand. See, that'll change everything. Here's the language of the poor. I'll try it a time or two and see what happens. It's the way poor people talk. The guy says, well, I'll give it 30 days. 30 days. You could guess his bank balance. You've got to have a better game plan. The formula really works like this. Pick up a good idea, take heavy action. Take heavy action on a good idea. Don't wait till you've learned 2,000 or 3,000 things. Because that way you'll use up all the time. And you could wind up smart and broke. And hey, it's okay to be dumb and broke. But if a guy's smart and broke, that's pitiful. Don't let your learning lead to knowledge. You'll become a fool. Let your learning lead to action. You can become wealthy. So here's one of the major things to do starting tomorrow. Take a look at your game plan. If it isn't loaded with massive action, change it. Tomorrow. Action. So there's all kinds of wealth, but to get a big share coming your way, you've got to have a heavy action game plan. Don't wish it was easier. Wish you were better. See, that triggered my whole life change. Don't wish for less problems. Wish for more skills. Don't wish for less challenge. Wish for more wisdom. See, that's the difference in how your life works out. It's not what happens, it's what you do. Starting tomorrow, what are you going to do that'll make a change in your life's direction? Good question. What are you going to do starting tomorrow that'll make a difference? Now see, if you don't do something starting tomorrow that'll make a difference, guess what? It's gonna be the same. And see, that way you can guess what the next 5 years are gonna be like. Look at the last 5. Because the next 5 are gonna be like the last 5 unless you, major key, tomorrow, change it all. Or change a little, or change something, or don't change. It's choice time. You can do whatever you want. But it's nice to know any day you wish you can change your whole life. What can you do starting tomorrow that'll make a difference? Anything. Success is something you attract, not something you pursue. Success is looking for a good place to stay. So instead of going after it, you work on yourself. Personal development. See, the major question to ask on the job is not what are you getting? The major question to ask on the job is, what are you becoming? See, the big question is not what am I getting paid here? The big question is, what am I becoming here? Because true happiness is not contained in what you get. Happiness is contained in what you become. 4 major lessons in life to learn. Here they are. Number 1, learn how to handle the winters. That's lesson 1. They come right after falls with regularity. Some are long and some are short and some are hard and some are easy, but they keep coming. You must learn to handle the nights. They come right after days. You must learn to handle difficulty. It comes right after opportunity. You must learn to handle recessions. They always follow progressions. For the last 6,000. See, it isn't going to change. The lesson you must learn is how to handle it. And there's all kinds of winters, right? The winter when you can't figure it out. The winter when it all goes smash. The winter when it turns belly up. The winter when it won't work, when you've run out of money and you've got a broken heart. See, those are winter times. There's all kinds. Economic winters, social winters, personal winters. When your heart is smashed in 1,000 pieces and the nights are unusually long, your prayers seem to go no higher than your head. It's wintertime. But see, the disappointments come. Those are normal. That's part of life. But the question is, how do you handle it? How do you handle the coming winters and the disappointments and the downtimes? Well, you can't get rid of January by tearing it off the calendar. But here's what you can do. You can get stronger, you can get wiser, and you can get better. The winters won't change, but you can. And that's how life changes for you. Here's lesson 2. Learn how to take advantage of the spring. That's the second one. Spring is called opportunity. See, opportunity always comes. Days follow nights. Isn't that terrific? Opportunity follows difficulty. But here's what you must learn to do. Underline these 2 words in that key phrase. Take advantage. Underline those 2. You must learn to take advantage of the spring. See, just because spring rolls around is no sign you're going to look good come fall. You gotta do something with it. In fact, you have to get good at one of 2 things in life. Planting in the spring or begging in the fall. Now here's what else you must do. Take advantage of the springs quickly, because there's only a few. Just a handful of springs have been handed to each of us. They don't come forever. Life is fairly brief. So whatever you're gonna do with your life, you got to get at it. Don't just let the springs pass. Here's the 3rd major lesson in life to learn. Learn how to protect your crops all summer. You gotta take care of what you start. Sure enough, as soon as you've planted your garden in the spring, the busy bugs and the noxious weeds are out to take it. You've got to learn to prevent the intruder from taking all the good you start. It's one of the challenges. All good will be attacked. Every garden will be invaded. Not to think so is naive. All values must be defended. Political values, social values, community values, family values, marriage values, friendship values, business values. Every garden must be tended all summer. Third major lesson. Now here's number 4. Learn to reap come harvest time without complaint. Take full responsibility for what happens to you. It's one of the highest forms of human maturity, accepting full responsibility. It's the day you know you've passed from childhood to adulthood, the day you accept full responsibility. And another note, learn to reap in the fall without apology. Without apology if you do well, and without complaint if you don't. That's maturity. So that's a key phrase. It's not what happens, it's what you do. Anything can happen, right? Everything can happen. I've heard all the stories. I've been one of the stories. Hey, we could all tell stories all night long, right? Happenings. Anything can happen. If anything can go wrong, it will. That's one of Murphy's laws. He was not one of the great positive speakers of the day. But anyway, it's still true though, right? Anything can go wrong, everything can go wrong. For sure. Everything can happen, anything can happen. But it's not the happenings, it's what you do about it. Everybody's had their share. Disappointments are not special gifts reserved for the poor. Everybody has them. The difference is what you do about it.
Se você acompanha ciclismo ou qualquer esporte de rendimento, você sabe que esse cara é diferente. Tadej Pogačar, esloveno de 26 anos, nascido em 1998, é hoje o ciclista mais dominante do planeta. A gente vai mostrar como é que ele chegou lá. Treinos, alimentação, recuperação, rotina fora da bike, tudo por trás do treinamento do Pogačar. Agora, no Fala Lu. Oi, eu sou Luadade, médica livre e docente pela USP, e trago aqui um conteúdo sobre saúde, qualidade de vida e esporte, sempre baseado na ciência, de forma descomplicada. E agora, para vocês terem noção de quem a gente está falando, o Pogačar já venceu 4 edições do Tour de France, 2020, 21, 24 e 25, e se tornou o tetracampeão mais jovem da história da prova. Em 2024, ele fez algo que só 3 ciclistas conseguiram fazer nos últimos 40 anos, a chamada tríplice coroa do ciclismo. Ele ganhou o Giro de Itália, o Tour de France e o Mundial na mesma temporada. Em Zurique, ele encerrou a temporada com uma escapada solo de mais de 100 quilômetros que deixou o pelotão inteiro para trás. Em 2025, ele defendeu o título mundial, dessa vez em Kigali, e chegou à sua 100ª vitória profissional só com 26 anos. Nos monumentos, ele acumula 13 vitórias, 5 vitórias seguidas no Giro de Lombardia, 4 na Liège-Bastogne-Liège e 3 no Tour de Flandres. E aí vem a pergunta que a gente quer responder hoje. O que esse cara faz de diferente? Começando então pelo treinamento. Uma das primeiras coisas que chama atenção quando a gente começa a estudar a preparação do Pogačar é que ele usa o monitor de frequência cardíaca desde os 10, 12 anos de idade. Atualmente, na preparação para o Tour, ele combina 3 métricas ao mesmo tempo. A frequência cardíaca, a potência em watts, que todos os ciclistas hoje usam, e o VAM, que é a velocidade ascensional média. Em um treino, por exemplo, ele consegue sustentar um VAM de 1.700 a 1.800 em 15 minutos. Ele diz que nas provas ele usa um cruzamento de confundir sensação de esforço com frequência cardíaca. Outra coisa super interessante é que a base do treinamento dele é baseada em zona 2, que é aquela intensidade aeróbica baixa, onde você trabalha sem queimar glicogênio de forma muito agressiva e constrói a base do motor. O Pogačar diz que ama treinar em Z2. O problema é que ele mora a maior parte do ano em Mônaco, onde o terreno é todo sobe e desce. Agora, ele diz que quando ele vai para a Eslovênia, que é a terra natal dele, ou quando ele treina em Calpe, na Espanha, ele faz sessões de até 5 horas inteiras em Z2, sem parar. Nessas sessões, a frequência cardíaca dele fica entre 140 a 155 batimentos por minuto e a potência entre 320 a 340 watts por 5 horas, mantendo o lactato sempre abaixo de 2 milimoles. O dia seguinte é de descanso. Agora, quando o percurso tem subida e descida, ele precisa alongar o tempo em cima da bike, baixa a potência para 290 a 300 watts, justamente para não ultrapassar o limiar de lactato e construir a qualidade do treino com os benefícios que ele precisa de um treino em Z2. O técnico dele já declarou numa entrevista que ele divide o treinamento de forma claramente polarizada. Muitas horas em Z2 e treinos de intensidade em Z4 e regenerativos bem leves na bike. Total de horas pedaladas na semana entre 23 a 28. E esse ano, ele deu uma liberada nos dados de potência dele do Strava, como a gente pode ver aqui nesse post. E olha o Z2 dele, gente. Acima de muito limiar de VO2 de amador forte. Um FTP de cerca de 415 a 440, baseado nesses números. Agora, ele fica muito acima disso quando ele faz os sprints de montanha, o que mostra uma capacidade absoluta de trabalhar acima do VO2 máximo. Olha aqui que absurdo esse treino que ele deixou com dados liberados abertos no Strava. Ele pedalou 226 quilômetros com 4.300 metros de ganho, é bastante coisa para quem pedala, uma velocidade média de 36,8 km por hora, pegou todos os cons do percurso. Desde 2021, ele também monitora a variabilidade da frequência cardíaca, o famoso HRV. Nos dias bons, o HRV dele fica entre 120, 130 até 150, e nos dias ruins pode cair para 35. E aí, durante o tour, ele mostrou que a média ficou entre 80 a 110 ao longo de todos os dias da prova. E ele refere um HRV máximo de 213 quando ele era mais novinho. A namorada dele, a Urska Zgart, que também é ciclista profissional, desenvolveu um hábito de olhar o HRV do Pogačar pela manhã, mas não falar o valor quando ele tem prova. Ela checa e guarda essa informação. Porque se o número estiver muito baixo, isso vai estressar ele pode largar com a cabeça ruim. Todo mês de dezembro, ele faz um teste de lactato no rolo e ele faz um protocolo de 1h30 escalonado, subindo a carga de 10 em 10 watts, com coleta de sangue a cada 5 minutos, para ter uma precisão das zonas de treinamento e assim calibrar o treinamento ao longo do ano, ou seja, tudo sempre muito baseado em dados. E a musculação, gente? O que muita gente não sabe é que parte da evolução do Pogačar em 2024 e 2025, quando ele chegou mais forte, visivelmente, tem a ver com o trabalho de força que ele intensificou nos períodos de off-season. Treino pesado de perna, musculação, algo que ele faz desde a adolescência. Quando ele treinava no time lá da Eslováquia, ele nada, faz corridas de trail e outros esportes no inverno, porque ele tem essa base atlética que vai muito além da bike. Hoje, durante a temporada, ele também mantém um trabalho de força com uma carga mais reduzida, mas ele não para a musculação durante as provas. E no off-season, ele já disse que não consegue ficar parado, ele é bem agitado. O máximo que ele admite são 3 dias sem fazer nada. Depois disso, ele já retoma essas outras atividades esportivas que ele adora para seguir com o corpo sempre ativo. Agora, uma parte bem interessante, que ele revelou desde que ele era júnior, ele tinha o hábito de estudar o percurso com antecedência e tentar encontrar, perto de onde ele estivesse, subidas parecidas com aquelas que ele ia enfrentar na prova. Ele gosta especificamente de subidas de uns 20 minutos, com um gradiente acima de 9%, porque ele diz que nessa inclinação o ritmo fica alto o suficiente para ser desafiador, sem virar um treino de alta intensidade pura. O que abre espaço para ele trabalhar com qualidade o esforço. E tem um fator que ele passou a treinar mais nos últimos anos, que é o calor, porque ele admite que ele sofreu muito nos primeiros tours e outras provas nos dias mais quentes. Então ele começou a incluir sessões no rolo, em ambientes aquecidos, para se preparar. Muitas vezes no tour eles pegavam dias muito quentes e aí ele precisava estar preparado. A gente consegue ver aqui nesse vídeo alguns exercícios interessantes que ele faz no aquecimento de provas usando elástico, que a gente também pode incorporar nas nossas rotinas pré-treino, ciclismo ou de outras modalidades. Entrando agora na área da nutrição, Pogačar pesa cerca de 66 quilos no pico da temporada e no off-season ele chega no máximo 69, 70. Mas o que chama atenção não é esse número na balança, mas a relação que ele tem com a comida. Não corta queijo, não corta chocolate e diz que proibir qualquer alimento por meses seguidos só vai criar uma relação mais doentia com a comida. E que quando você quebra essa restrição, você acaba exagerando. Tudo tem hora, tudo tem medida, mas nada é proibido. E no off-season, ele come com qualidade, sem exagero, porque ele não sente aquela compulsão, porque ele passou meses se privando. Agora, falando da nutrição dentro das provas. Nas etapas difíceis, ele consome cerca de 120 gramas de carboidrato por hora. E ele diz que há 5 anos ele não conseguia. Parecia impossível para o organismo dele. Ele foi treinando e se adaptou. Ele fala que nas sessões mais duras no passado, ele acabava com vários problemas estomacais, chegava a vomitar nas chegadas. Ele fez 2 coisas que mudou tudo: adaptação intestinal ao longo do tempo e um trabalho com a nutricionista da equipe, que desenvolveu fórmulas específicas de géis e bebidas com proporção de glicose, frutose e outros componentes para que ele pudesse absorver. Então hoje ele consegue fazer 120 gramas de carboidrato por hora sem nenhum desconforto. Nas bebidas, ele diz que prefere uma versão com 30 gramas por bebida. Vocês sabem que nos profissionais, né, eles recebem aquelas garrafinhas da equipe de apoio e aí ele complementa com comida sólida. Em equipes mais tranquilas, ele diz consumir 90 gramas por hora porque já é o suficiente. A gente consegue ver aqui nesse post o que ele consumiu numa etapa do último tour, totalizando então 1.200 gramas de carboidrato e 150 de proteína. E a gente pode ver como tudo isso foi dividido, considerando que foi uma prova de montanha de 5 horas e mostrando todas as refeições, não só o intraprova. O cara tem um super cuidado nessas etapas para manter uma ingesta bem alta de carboidrato, porque isso impacta muito na recuperação e na performance nos dias consecutivos. E pensando nessa ingesta otimizada de carbo, tem algo que pode ser útil pra gente. A Dobro, que é parceira aqui do canal, lançou o novo Carbs 40, que tem 40 gramas de carboidrato por sachê, usando uma combinação de glicose e frutose. Na prática, isso funciona muito para a estratégia de prova. Você consegue bater a ingesta que você precisa de carboidrato, carregando menos géis, tendo uma menor manipulação durante o exercício, por exemplo, em cima de uma bicicleta. Essa estratégia de transporte duplo melhora a absorção intestinal, reduz desconforto, fazendo com que você consiga também chegar na ingesta ideal para você. Link da Dobro aqui na descrição e tudo na Dobro tem desconto com Fala Lu, não só o Gel Carb 40, como todos os demais produtos. Então, aproveita. E agora, como é que é a recuperação do Pogačar? A frequência cardíaca de repouso dele durante o sono é de cerca de 37 batimentos, o que mostra que ele tem um condicionamento excepcional. Isso é relevante porque reflete essa capacidade de recuperação que ele tem e também de aptidão cardiovascular. Ele fala do sono como um eixo fundamental para